Good morning. Have you ever said something that you wish you had never said? We probably all been there. Have you made a decision before that you looked at it afterwards and said, man, that was dumb. I wish I hadn't have made that. Well, as all of you know, Eleanor's bad about telling things on me, so I'm going to tell this on me. And we're talking about a bad decision. I had always wanted to get these big old horns. Y'all probably seen them. You put over a door or something, big old things. I wanted those things. I mean, but I didn't want to pay for those big new ones. So coming home from work, I stopped at this little old place they was selling stuff, and there was those horns. It was old and needed a little bit of work, but I bought that thing. I was so proud of them. I said, I'm going to take these home, and I'm going to put this over a door or something. And I paid $2 for that thing. So I said, I know that, this will be good. Well, I got them things home, and they were huge. And I come taking them in the house, and I turned around and showed that to Eleanor. I said, look what I got. She looked at it, and she said, that ain't going in this house. And it didn't. That thing went straight to the garage. And so, needless to say, that was a bad decision. That's not the only one I made, but it is one that I remember. And I want us to look at today in the Bible about two individuals who I'd say got into a little bit of a conflict. Peter and Paul. You believe that? Y'all probably remember some of this. This is in Galatians, the 2nd chapter, starting in verse 11. But when Cephas, or Peter, came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. Now this is Peter, probably the most famous evangelist and preacher at that time. Before certain men came from James, he was eating with the Gentiles, but when they came in, he drew back and separated himself, fearing the circumcision party, and the rest of the Jews acted hypocritically along with him. So even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. Now here's Peter and Paul. They're having this big gathering and having a big feast there for Gentiles, and the Jews came in. Now the Jews came in later, but Peter was all fine until the Jews came in. Well, and Peter separated himself. That'd be embarrassing, wouldn't it? All of a sudden you're in there with a group of people, and then you turn around and just took away from them and went over here with this other group. And he did. He went over there with the Jews and started associating with the Jews. And I know this was embarrassing to Paul. And Paul had to have a little word with him about it. Now, this was not a good decision on Peter's part, was it? It was a bad decision. But did Peter think it was a bad decision? No. He didn't think anything about it because Peter was a Jew. But Peter had in his head that he had to continue to recognize all the Jewish traditions, you know, and eat the right food. Well, these Gentiles wasn't eating that right food. All kosher food. Clean food. And there Peter was, he's going to be over there with these Jews, and he's going to partake of that, the clean food. But what he did, he separated himself from the rest of the group. And Paul definitely wanted the Gentiles to be felt welcome. Well, do you think they felt welcome there with Peter? No. They didn't feel welcome with Peter during that time, did he? So Paul had to let Peter know that that wasn't right. Now, I didn't get it right here in all these passages that Peter apologized with this. Because Peter probably still thought he was right. That according to the Jewish laws, you had clean food and you had unclean food. So he still thought he was okay. How many times have we had people where we've done something we thought was right and they'd say, no, that ain't right. But it didn't bother us. We still just hung right in there because we thought we were right. But Peter, as we see in the Bible, he changed. But you know what? It took God to change him. He didn't change himself. Let's look at Acts 10, starting in verse 9. God came to Peter in a vision. The next day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up on the housetop above the 6th hour to pray. And he came hungry and wanting something to eat, but while they were preparing it, he fell into a trance and saw the heavens opened and something like a great sheet descending, being let down by its four corners upon the earth. In it were all kinds of animals, reptiles, and birds of the air. And there came a voice to him, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean." And the voice came to him again in a second time. What God has made clean, do not call common. This happened 3 times, and the thing was taken up once into heaven. So Peter, through a vision, found out through God that what he was doing was not right. It wasn't right. And God showed him through this vision that if God made it, it was clean. And I think after that, Peter's eyes was open. Peter's eyes was open. I want to give you a little bit of a testimony that I have that really had a big part. And after, of course, becoming a Christian was the greatest things that ever happened to me. But sometimes you have things that happen to you that has a big impact on your life. And I have to say that this one did. And this was part of my work. I had moved up into the ranks. I was a manager of of a plant and a big company, and man, I thought I was just great. I knew everything. I mean, all the people, they did what I said. I mean, you know, I never did get challenged. I was around people that worked with me and worked for me. So the company made a decision to send me to a school. And this was a school that was a lot of different people, companies participated in this thing. It was big. And it was a school on teamwork. When you went into this, we went out of town, away from everything. We had this hotel or motel there that we went into. All your cell phones, they took them up. You can't make no calls. You were there. And they had your undevoted attention. Now, prior to going, they gave us a workbook. I had about 2 or 3 weeks. In that workbook, you worked these problems. Well, I had all of it. I worked all those up. I thought, man, I'm prepared. I went in there. I went down there. We didn't know what was going to happen. They turned around and put us 7 people to a group and stuck us, and they probably was over 200 people in there, but they stuck us in a room and locked the door. And it had a restroom in it and had, something to eat and all like that. But there we was, 7 people. Then they gave us this problem. And they said, we want you to come up with the best answer. And, of course, the next morning, everybody's together and you give your answer. Well, there we was in there. Nobody knew anybody else. Well, each one of us started trying to get our answer as the one was going to be used. I thought mine was the best. So, man, I was talking it up. Well, the other 6 did the same way. They thought theirs was. And, man, we was going around and around, and we had this one little guy. He was just a little meek kind of guy, and he tried to tell about his. We just ignored him. We just overruled that little old guy. We finally came up with our answer. The next morning, when we end up giving our answer before the whole group, our answer was one of the worst that was presented that morning. Come to find out, the answer we was looking for had to be greater than any individual in that group. Well, guess what? That little old guy had the best answer by far, which we ignored. Well, they gave us another problem the next day. We went back in there, trying to come up with the best answer. Now, we're still a little bit set in our ways. I mean, all of these are professional people that have a lot of authority. And we thought ours ought to be used. So we did that the second day. Of course, it wasn't good. It took us 3 days, and this was 7 days. It took us at least 3 days to figure out what we were doing was not what was being asked of us. And so we began to try to come up with not individual answers, but what the best out of the group, all the 7 togethers. We began to try to work as a team to come up unified together. That was very hard. But you create synergy when the sum of all is greater than one individual in the group. And that's what we were trying to do. As a team, come up with one answer. And when you have 7 professional people trying to come up with one answer, you can see how difficult that was. Well, we got better by the end of the week, and we went up in the ranks. We never was the best, but we did do a lot better. And it had a bearing on my life because I got to sin. Because in that team, those people were honest. If you did something, made the wrong decision or whatever, they call you out. They didn't care. They didn't know you was anybody or whatever. So they always took and let you know when you was wrong. Hey, that ain't right. That's wrong. Well, some of us had not heard that from anybody other than our wives, probably. But you heard it. You heard it there. And so you found out some of it through intimidation. That, hey, you wasn't all that big guy that you thought you ever was. You were just a little bitty guy in a big group. And that's what counted. So we thought, man, at the end of the week, we thought we had really done something. You know, I did. I thought this was really a lesson for all of us. But that wasn't the end. At the very end of the session, they had this big board that you used a black pen on it, you know. We have them here, flipboard. And each one of us had to get up there with that pen in our hand, and the other 6 had to tell all about you that they saw in you the rest of that week. And they had to tell all the bad that they saw in you. Now, I'm up there with that pen in my hand, and I want to tell you, I didn't particularly like to hear all that kind of stuff. But you didn't have any choice. And I started writing down things. And I want to tell you, church, they wasn't good. Some of them I couldn't even hardly spell. But they were not good things. And honestly, I did not know that I presented that kind of character that they had laid on me. But it was awakening to me. Now, in the second page, they would give you some of the good things that they saw in you. Now, I have to say, I had a whole page of bad things, only about 2 good things that was on there. But all 7 of us had to go through that. And, of course, they got a lot better, but I think I was about the 3rd one. By the time they got to the 7th one, I mean, gosh, they were loaded to bear. But the thing that I came away from there that really changed my whole perspective was sometimes we say things that we get called out for. And I got called out for it amongst a bunch of strangers. Now, your friends a lot of times won't do that. But I learned from this that you need to listen to others, because some of the others could very well have the better answer. Chances are that is the case. But as human beings, we're sort of like that because we like to be heard and everything. But to achieve greatness, this is through any group, if in business as a group, as a church, as church members. When you come together, it's not you, it's not me, it's God. And we need to ask God for His guidance and not push our old deal on you. But ask for God, for Him to work in our church, in our lives. I know after that, I had a whole different perspective. I changed my whole attitude toward business and toward life. Because after that session, I became a team player. Because my eyes was open. And I found out after that, I came over here to Anderson and started to plan up here in town. And one of the first things I did, I tried to surround myself with great people. Frank Isbell was the number one guy. Y'all all know Frank. He's just great in his church, but he's great in business. And I got other people around me too. And all the people that we had, we used them. We used their ideas. We made that whole plant a team kind of thing. We ended up being one of the best running plants in the whole company. But we didn't do it because of Jim Hibb. We didn't even do it because of Frank. We did it because we were a team. We come together and you let everybody have a say. But we come up with the best answer. We come up with what was best. And that's what we need to do. We need to set aside our own opinions and our own whatever that they may be and look, what's best for us? How's God leading us? And I guarantee you that we will see great things happen. Now, my prayer today is that we will not look at what my way is or your way, but we will look for God's way and let God lead us, and we'll do great things.